Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to the FMCG Guys podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Torres. If this is the first time you tune into the show, we speak here with the top talents, leaders, and luminaries in the consumer goods and retail industries. We're now 180 episodes in already. So do go into our website or your favorite podcast platform to entertain yourself and be educated with some of the industry's top voices. We've had CEOs, CMOs, chief growth officers, chief supply chain officers, and other top voices of the industry. So I think you'll have fun if you're a part of this industry, which fortunately we've all come to love as we've worked into it. And do remember, by the way, we are part of a family of podcasts, which is headed by the CPG guys in the US, who are now 400 plus episodes in since 2020. They have 32,000 followers on LinkedIn, which is crazy. And if you want to learn about what's happening in the consumer goods industry in the US, don't waste any time and go into their show as well. And talking about LinkedIn followers, we're over 16,000 LinkedIn followers in now. So thanks all for your support and remember to follow us there. One thing that we've reached in this year, 2024, is that the world of grocery and FMCG is dynamic as always. But I think the one thing that's keeping CEOs or C-level executives and probably your account manager as well up at night is growth. So finding that growth, we're seeing companies that are reporting good profits, but growth in terms of like top line is really becoming a challenge. So to speak about this, we have a true expert in finding growth in FMCG, and it's no other than Darren Keen, who's the CEO of Europe at Mars United Commerce. Hey, Darren, how are you?
Daniel, hello. Great to be with you today, and thank you for having me on the podcast.
No, I'm excited because I think that it is quite clear, that growth is the number one topic right now in FMCG. That is like, how can we grow again? What are the ways?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's evergreen. And I guess we'll get into that over the next 30 minutes or so. But, for me, it's that constant key performance indicator. And there's no question it's become tougher to get to, for all organizations and particularly FMCG within the challenging world that we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had Katrina Smart, also from Mars United Commerce, earlier this year on the show, specifically to talk about retail media. But since she came, I think in Feb, and now we're recording this episode in August. Oh my God, It's hard to believe we're in August already. Yeah. How have you seen this year so far?
I think it's been one of for FMCG and the FMCG community, I think it's been one of steadiness, consolidation. I mean, I think from a local to the UK, but I guess a European perspective, there's been a lot of turmoil. We've had, if you think about the last 3 to 4 years, with coming out of a pandemic, the challenges within Ukraine and other micro factors, there's been a lot of turmoil in both the planning and activation of how CPG and FMCG businesses show up to their customers and then ultimately their shoppers. I do sense that from this year, there felt like certainly across our client base, I'm not going to call it a new normal, but a revised normal in terms of how the C-suite of those businesses and the operators within those businesses, particularly the marketers, have been able to perhaps normalize and plan perhaps in a more traditional way. And therefore, the conversations they're having with their retail partners and other stakeholders is becoming a little bit more long-sighted than it did before. And I think internally for them, it's about making or having the ability to make some better decisions that aren't just how do we get through the next 3 months or the next 12 months. It's what does a refreshed 3-year or 5-year ambition cycle look like. So I think that's the key change for me. Of course, there's been a lot of dynamism happening, both in the physical and digital shelf environment. Technology continues apace, and again, I know this is something that we'll no doubt get into, but the sort of the emergence, or the rapid emergence of how technology is sort of interacting with our shoppers at the point of buying is never abating. So I think that's really probably one of the key big changes of the year as that accelerates, and how brands are not only responding to that opportunity but deciding how to navigate it, which is a key issue.
Yeah. I think that this a bit of a new normal, but also a lot of new stimulus as well, which is difficult. I think sometimes companies find it difficult when they've worked in one specific way for a long time to really disrupt themselves. They talked about disrupting themselves years ago. They don't use this word anymore.
Yeah.
But
well, I think disrupt is a great word to use, because any organizational change is really disruptive. It's difficult.
Yeah.
And so disruptive in the positive is about shaking things up, getting to a new level of operating for advantage. The challenge of doing that, of course, for any large organization, particularly CPG, which is dynamic and by the nature of the name, fast moving, it's very difficult to uproot your organization internally, albeit a lot of CEOs and CMOs know that. It's a necessity. But you have to live in the now, you have to live in next month, and then you have to live in the near-term future. And it's a difficult organizational switch to be as dynamic as perhaps the environment around you, that's for sure.
Yeah. And we're seeing companies, they're starting to change the ways of working, which is going to be, it's for one thing is for certain, Darren, I think we're going to be having fun. So what does your role mean as CEO Europe?
Good question. So I'm the European CEO for Mars United Commerce. I would describe my responsibility to lead the strategic and operational direction of our European operation. Ultimately, I'm responsible for our company's purpose in this specific region, which is growth for our people, our clients, and our communities. So we have a very strong purpose, which we're very proud of at Mars. In practical terms, I'd describe myself as a very hands-on leader. I truly believe you need to be that in a service-led operation as ours. And I get very involved, for example, in client strategy, for example, to the point even being involved strategically with activational programs. And I think ultimately, or additionally, should I say, I also look after some of our international initiatives in places like China, Southeast Asia, and recently in LATAM, where we've sought out growth over the past decade beyond our sort of tradition of being founded in the US and then coming to Europe. So it's very exciting. I'd tell you, globally, we have a very flat, connected structure. So I guess I'm talking to North America and Asia every day. It's certainly an exciting role.
Yeah. Well, and when you hire smart people, you want it to be flat, right? Because that way,
absolutely,
the smart people at all levels get their voices heard.
Ultimately. Yeah, and you have to let them do what they're great at doing. And I guess my role is supporting them do what they're best at doing, and it's a joy to see that come to fruition.
Exactly. And Darren, when we had Katrina on the show, the company was called the Mars Agency.
Yes.
Recently rebranded to Mars United Commerce. What's behind that?
Great question again, and quite a frequent question, as you would imagine, and one that I'm very proud to answer. We've always had a very pioneering spirit since our foundation in Detroit, in the US, back in 1972.
Female founded the company.
Yeah, so our original founder was Marilyn Barnett, who founded the business in 1972 in Detroit, as I said. Her son Ken actually really drove the business from the mid-70s to the present day, actually, and very much as he set up, our now operating structure. And as Ken rapidly grew the business, we always led the way I guess within that retail-focused specialism, I had that really pioneering spirit, and that saw us, I guess, as a business drive the early shopper and customer marketing agenda. And I guess we're very proud of our pioneering behaviour within that phase. Getting to more recently, in recent years, we've continued to build around our clients' need, of course, and developed an end-to-end responsiveness and set of capabilities to support our clients' connected commerce journeys. And describing that's everything from planning all the way through to activation, and of course measurement at the back end of that. And to that end, and I think it's important to describe that, because it kind of tells the story of why we made the change in our own name. But over that period of about 5 years, we built an ecosystem with really 4 distinct specialisms around strategy and analytics, of course, retail consultancy, a heartland space for us, content and experiences, and not won't be surprising to you, digital commerce. And these capabilities are all supported by our data-centric technology platform, which, by the way, we call Marilyn in honor of our founder. So I hope that kind of neatly explains that bit. But coming to your question, I think knowing our advancements, we're at the heart of our clients' real-time needs, their now needs. We determined this year it was definitely time to be clear and distinct about our united commerce capabilities, and hence the name change. I would say it's been very well received by all. It was a big deal for us internally. It was we hope, a big moment for our immediate industry. And we felt we got way beyond the term agency, actually. A lot of our clients refer to us as more commerce partners. And that's absolutely the direction we want to be. We still do all the things we always did, but we've built very distinct competencies to really meet the need of that commerce journey for the clients that we enjoy and love working with.
Awesome, makes sense. And what so we talked about like growth as like really the issue of what's keeping consumer goods CEOs up at night. So why has growth become an issue? So maybe we can even think of like 2019, I forget even what the context was then, but we went into 2020, most COVID, and most FMCG companies did well. What happened after that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you split this into 2 parts. I mean, what keeps you reference what keeps CEOs up at night, and I think there's some distinct things there that lead into the reality of growth. I guess I'll deal with the first piece first. I would say, there's just this consistent macroeconomic uncertainty. As a CEO, that's real. You're living within that. Outside of the things you can control. You think about inflation and interest. If you think about the last 2 weeks, socio-political unrest at a global and a local level. And all of these things affect everything from supply chain to how our shoppers are making decisions about the choices in terms of, or at least the choices they make on a frequency basis, which channel they're going to buy from. These things affect them. And that's outside of your ability to talk from a marketing platform point of view. That's kind of almost out of control of your remit. So I think that's been a challenge to growth. There's no question. I would say probably the largest in determining whether you turn left or right in the decisioning to achieve growth. I think another issue has been or continues to be achieving really successful omni-channel execution. Per our own strategic alignment, I guess, as a business, that continual conversation we're having with senior FMCG leaders is one around unified commerce, as we've already referenced, and really how do you bring about effectiveness in that area? It's both certainly an internal and external issue for CEOs. As it requires, and we talked about this already, actually, and I'm sure we will again within the next minutes. But it's what changes are required to make definitive success there. And as I said, organizational change is hard, particularly when you have established practices and capability organization. I would say the reason for growth, and then I'll talk about some of the levers perhaps, is just the kind of the real world right now, that speed of consumer preference, the change of that preference. And I believe it's quite a generational issue. On one hand, we think about this, and these are real conversations in real briefs we get every day, the sustainability and health consciousness, which are two massive conversation topics in our food and beverage clients, and others, of course, but particularly there. And that's driving one part of the change agenda. And then there's a whole other area of being adapt for digital transformation. And therefore, you talk about, change, and that's about identifying where shoppers want to be interacted with, and ultimately transact. There's 100 places I can buy something that perhaps 10 years ago I'd only buy in a couple of channels. So the real challenge here for me is that lifestyle digitization happens faster than commerce capability change. Yeah. Or the readiness to that. I think about, of course myself, but I look at the guys in our business, my kids, one's 19, one's 21, their pace of change and an adapt to the latest platform that is absolutely integral into their own lives. And you have these big FMC organizations that have to follow what they're doing and meet their needs. And it's really tough. So, I would say that because that probably happens faster than a company or a brand owner can keep up with, I think the important point to make here is that as long as brands are showing up in these areas in the right places, even if it's only in a small and meaningful way, consumers and shoppers will clock that and put them in a contemporary or brand for me bucket. And so it's not about changing everything you do, because that's unrealistic, but it's about being contemporary and current with where your shoppers are.
Yeah, and it's like also the mix of being like true to your brand and your legacy and what you've always
of course
with really like finding the ways to connect with consumers, not be them young or old or whatever. But
yeah, and that's the thing. There's a lot of debate. That's a great point, Daniel. about there's sometimes we can lazily think about innovation and transformation being within the ownership, within the gift of youth, and of course that's not true. It's about behaviours that change. And we know absolute verbatim that we need to be very careful about socioeconomic classing or age classing. It's really about how people behave, and that seems to be across economic spectrums and of course certainly age spectrums. My dad's 84, and he's pretty much as savvy in how he uses his mobile and interacts with the things that interest him as I am and as my kids are. So I think that's a realism that cannot be ignored.
No.
Going back to growth as an issue, Daniel, there's no question. I think it's always been the centrifuge of commerce. It's certainly for me, and long term, the way we discuss with our clients, it's probably the key success KPI in reality. Investors and stakeholders are hyper focused on growth because it symbolizes the health of a brand in terms of its value and penetration. And actually, I guess most importantly, operationally, growth is that clear factor of how you're doing within your competitive set, because you're either stealing share or you're growing the category. And if you're not doing any of those two things, you're probably not growing. So there's no question that the obsession of growth has become, I guess, more seismic as the routes to shop have become more complex. And so the game to identify, I guess, how you execute and manage across that spectrum becomes tougher.
Yeah. So from your perspective, what are like the key levers that CEOs or also chief growth officers and so on can pull to drive growth?
Yeah, there's of course many. I would say the ones that stand in front of us as a business in the immediacy are leveraging data, which is a wide subject matter, of course. Digital commerce and innovation, I would say, would be my top three.
And you talk about data, leveraging data. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's. In terms of leveraging data, it's how you do that drives, I would say, in a contemporary way, how you interact with your selling funnel as a business. Knowing who, when, and where is utterly fundamental, and that's not a new concept, but your ability to adapt to that is becoming more accessible. I mean, the more power you hold here, the better you attract, engage, and close, those important sales with your shoppers. I think the watch out, particularly right now, is the sheer breadth of data. And in truth, much of it is still not as connected between platforms as we'd like, as our FMCG clients would like, but it is getting there. And of course, there's much energy from FMCG, certainly the FMCG clients that we're interacting with, about determining how to create efficiency and advantage through data-led decisioning that's available to them through their data access.
No, yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because a lot of times we talk of the use cases of the data, but then we probably overlook how much effort and how human capital intensive it is to actually manage the data properly.
It is a huge issue, because I think the reality of data is we're moving through. We're still relatively early on the experience curve of how data is impacting businesses. Now, of course, data and the notion of big data has been around for the last decade, so that's not new news. But the availability and access and the leveragement of that data is right now, and the decision to decide which data you believe is credible, which data you believe is useful to you as a business, and then how you use that data, not only effectively, but cost effectively. Because in most cases, FMCG businesses probably don't own the data that's most useful to them, certainly not currently. And of course, first-party data is another huge issue, and the advantages and disadvantages of doing that, of course. Data is amazing. It's still relatively, it's expensive. It's value within the product mix from a finance point of view, and then the marketing execution mix is being worked out. And there's lots of test and learns that go on all the time about how you use specific data in certain platforms, whether that's within Carrefour or Tesco, or in pure play like Amazon, of course. And the big news last year with Amazon's AMC clean room environment, so you could really understand what your shoppers were doing, is amazing. But at the very least, you still need to change the types of people that can go into those platforms and really understand that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's, we've had to adapt our business to do that. 5 years ago, we didn't have Amazon analysts who could go in and really make sense of what they were seeing. And therefore, in tandem, which goes back to, how we've created our structure within our business to adapt to those changing needs. And I think finally, I talked about, next talked about digital commerce, which is connected, of course. And it's clearly an opportunity that brands are certainly healthily progressing. And when we talk about digital commerce, the spectrum, of course, covers all forms of retailer media, how brands show up within them. And particularly, I would say, the digital shelf, which has many forms. I will say, I think that's a ruthless environment. If shoppers are in and out in a millisecond, if you don't provide what they want instantly, and so I think that's key. And I guess that it's an incredible lever of change, but your ability to focus on it as an FMCG business and how we support our clients doing that is absolutely key.
Yeah.
And I think I talked about innovation as a third one.
Yeah.
For me, it's a bit of an old term, but new news has never gone out of fashion. Whether you're presenting to a retailer at an annual planning meeting or activating directly with shoppers, the desire and need for refreshment is always required, whether that's better product attributes and values. And I would say they'll continue to lead the choice at shelf. I think about innovation. I mean, it takes so many forms. But it's ultimately deep-rooted in our human psyche. People want to see what's next as macro things change. I talked about sustainability and health consciousness as two big issues. brands have to adapt with product innovation and delivery of those products in an innovative way to stay ahead, because shoppers are making decisions and choices on factors like that. And it's important to do that. The challenge that every FMCG owner will tell you about innovation is the success rate can be difficult.
Yeah.
Again, it's about making and placing those right bets in enough time to enact that innovation. But again, the full cycle, access to the right data, giving you the right information, ultimately the right insights about how to make the right decisions on which path of innovation you want to choose is clearly a fundamental growth lever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something that FMCGs have kind of overlooked in a lot of ways, because if you think of how many new billion-dollar brands have come out of like big FMCGs, and it's not very many, right? So,
yeah, and I think it's definitely a risk issue. I mean, we talked early on about growth and performance and stakeholders and investors, and the last 5 years has been precarious. It hasn't been a fertile environment for that. Certainly, as I sort of grew up through my career, we saw those big moments where those brands did appear, or certainly, sub brands of existing sort of master or mother brands appeared. I think we'll see some change happen. I mean, there's in that specific area, because it's now not just we understand how shoppers shop, we know where people buy things. The channel availability for brands to deliver something new has changed dramatically, but it's also highly fragmented. So I see, whilst we don't see billion-dollar brands, there are tens or hundreds of case studies annually about that real category disruptor coming in, whether it's in the baby category, the drinks category, the food category, where they're making a big noise fast because they understand that the legacy of channels that those bigger, more established FMCG brands are very much vested in and organized around. Those rules don't apply to them. They say, do you know what? Our route to market is Amazon. Our route to market is Tesco.com, whatever it is. And they're all in on that, and they make a lot of noise very quickly. I think there's like huge growth challenges for those guys, because then you have distribution and relationships and all those other things that are part of the vested reality of an established FMCG business. But that's where we're seeing it, and that's what's niggling away at the established FMCG operators for sure.
No, for sure. So what with the type of work that you guys are doing as Mars United Commerce with FMCG clients related to growth, I don't know if there's any example of something exciting you're doing.
Yeah, I mean,
a few ones, no?
Yeah, there's a lot. I guess from a confidentiality perspective, I guess I'm able to talk about the type of transformative work that we're doing, as opposed to giving you absolute specific examples. I mean, that's always the challenge with exciting work, is that it's highly confidential, and of course,
give us the teaser.
Yeah, certainly, absolutely. I mean, I guess there's a couple that come to mind. The first is for many of our FMCG clients is defining the strategies in how to show up across the shopper journey. That is, what to say and where to say it. It's not a brand new challenge for them, but as channels change and opportunities emerge, I think it's still key, and it still becomes an effectiveness play for many of our clients. I've talked a lot already today about connected, unified, or of course in our case, united commerce, and it's really real. And it's how shoppers shop nowadays. Our work for clients and high-profile blue chip FMCG clients is co-defining with them and setting out, at a scaled perspective, those brilliant basics in how to go about this at a regional or even pan-regional level. And many of our clients within their centre of excellence are creating those initiatives to make sure that it's not just their core top 5 markets globally that can really adapt to effective end-to-end shopper journeys. It's that all of their 30, 40 or 50 markets are are educated and fueled with the ability to be able to do that. So we're doing a lot of work there for some great clients, and it's about not only telling them the theory, it's about really giving them the tools and the practices to go out and do that tomorrow, which is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also, because there's always the thing of like global capabilities deployed locally and how you balance that part. And of course,
it really is
emerging markets are where a lot of growth is coming from.
Yeah,
and they're not necessarily the top 5 markets right now, right? So it's
absolutely. I mean, I would say, you know, what's traditionally been called the BRIC markets are, you know, sort of political challenges aside, still hold, you know, over the next 5 years, probably the greatest growth opportunity for FMCG businesses, no question. And it's how they balance the focus on maintaining their large, particularly if I think about North America and Europe, established businesses, but taking full advantage of that kind of hyper growth that can happen in places like China and LATAM and India, of course. But saying all of that, I think, you know, for others in the same vein, it's about digging really deep in specific market where the channel mix is complex.
Yeah.
You know, as I've said, you know, that type of work is common for us in the US, larger European markets, places like Australia. But we are doing some very exciting work for Western, I guess I'd describe as Western headquartered clients in places like China, where we're researching shopper responsiveness in very distinct channels and how that ladders up to the wider shopper journey, because there's often uncertainty about how that works. So you've got to really dive in, be hyper local in your data understanding, and then drive the insight to what moves the shopper and how that fits in the broader piece. I think the other or the next sort of really exciting piece of growth initiative work is we're doing a great deal of consulting, which I guess it wasn't surprising to me, but I was more surprised by the need with some of our blue chip clients and how they recognise. I think we talked about this really early on at the top of this, but the power of retailer or commerce media, and how and the real issue is how it fits within their overall marketing effort, and most importantly, the work we're doing is how ultimately they need to look inwards and become really fit for purpose and ability to deliver it before they actually look to make changes in the media choices they're making. You know, many businesses continue to, you know, for some of the reasons we've talked about, continue to operate in a relatively traditional way from a capability perspective. I mean, it takes a lot to build a big business with thousands of employees doing smart things. And of course, we work with some incredibly and exceptionally talented client groups, but it's accepted that how they work really does need to change and become commerce first minded. You know, they understand that, but you know, there's still a sales funnel. We talked about that already, but it's how consumers and consumers and shoppers act and react within it has become very dynamic. So, you know, some of the exciting work we're doing, you know, beyond the everyday, you know, taking brands to market and creating share change, positive share change, is actually co-educating and sharing the ability to perhaps organize differently within the business, so that marketing and sales and shopper marketing and media actually are integrating and operating in a very distinct way. Each FMCG business has its own challenge with that. They all recognise there's a need to do it and find the sharpest and smartest outcome to it.
Yeah, well, there's a huge governance issue that comes with it now, because you need to really reshuffle organizations, and it's just a change of paradigm. Like, who would have said 5 years ago that an account manager would need to talk about media and at least know about media, right? Like,
Absolutely,
that would be kind of unheard of.
Yeah, it was quite a distinct operating unit within any business, including the marketing agency industry, by the way. You know, the media guys were kind of over there somewhere doing their thing, and it has to be utterly integrated now to be effective.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you see in the next 3 years? What's your prediction for the industry? Where will it go?
Big question. I mean, I have sort of 2 or 3 distinct regular thoughts about that. I mean, we've already talked about a lot about connected commerce. As we call it, we changed our name. It's about unified or united commerce. And I think the power of data that's driving that will underpin everything commerce going forward. Clinically knowing your 5 Ws, of your shoppers, who, what, when, where, why, and operating within the connected platforms, including physical stores, by the way, will be the ultimate trigger to conversion. As we said, there's so much to be said about data, but it certainly needs to be the focused for united or unified commerce. There's no question. So that's the accessibility to data and the usage of data is certainly how the industry will evolve in terms of its own operation. That's for sure. I think, on that, my view is all of our clients get it, and they're moving through a data access and prioritization phase of that data integration life cycle. There's a lot of unknowns and results in experience still. I know we touched on that earlier, but so that smart decisioning is the real life challenge right now as we go into the next 3 years. I know I need to use data. It's just which set and how. I would say is definitely the one of the things over the next 3 years. I do also want to talk about, I guess, creative connectivity, because, most of our day now is talked about the mechanics of success, data centricity, the four corners of how we're operating our business. But, a big part of that is still that creative connectivity, or perhaps more importantly, that emotional connectivity. And it's easy for that to be overlooked, particularly as people look forward and invest in the things they think are important to drive success to their business. And I think, achieving attachment with an audience with noughts and ones is fine. It's definitely the future foundation, as we talked about. But the FMCG businesses and companies that will win, from my perspective, will continue to be able to have those wonderful and emotional conversations at the right moments. And you see it evidenced all the time when a brand just disrupts the conversation in what can be often very challenging, quite static or staid environments, in the buying process. I think can be incredible. So brands that have personality, that go a bit left rather than right, that still speak differently beyond their product attributes is continues to be key. So, it's finding that absolute balance between really driving that data centricity that will power your business. But when you get to an audience, talk to them properly. And I would say, the net effect of both is, and coming back to the things that are the most important in all our lives, is that a shopper stops and thinks, wow, there's a brand that really knows me. They got me at the right time, at the right place, but actually most importantly, with the right conversation.
Yeah.
So I think that's absolutely fundamental.
It's about having that backbone of process and so on, but also have like the smarts and the creativity and the vision, if you like, no?
Yeah, it's a really important balance. It's neither one or the other, and I can't think of many categories, and certainly not within FMCG. When I say categories, I mean industries, but certainly categories within FMCG that don't require that ability to connect better than your competitor brand and the mechanics that let you get there, but also then to really surprise and delight with the conversations that you have and the motivations that you give them.
Yeah. So Darren, wanted to ask you, and this is a question that we ask all our guests. So you've made it to be the head of Europe for Mars United Commerce, I guess you did a few things right in your career. The question is a few things, probably some few wrong ones as well, as everyone. But
of course, yeah, that's the important bit.
You can't do the right ones without the wrong ones as well. But my question is, if you had to go back to your younger self when you were starting your work career, what would be that one piece of advice you would give yourself?
Yeah, brilliant. And obviously being an avid listener to your podcast.
So you've heard it before.
Yeah, well, I had a feeling it was coming, so I kind of prepped in my mind a little bit about my answer. And it is a great question. And so important, actually, because it's what it's kind of what fuels us as humans in terms of how we behave and how we enact. I mean, I would say I never want to negate the reality of wisdom through experiencing it or doing. And nowadays there's definitely an emerging sense for a fast fix for everything, and tech advancements. We talked a lot about it today, can deliver a lot of it, but it's often surface deep or immediate. And I guess as you become, what is painfully termed as an agency veteran, painful for me, you realize that your present day smarts, where you got to be able to do the things you do in your role, are about connecting all of those unique and quirky experiences and outcomes along the way. So I guess on that, the advice I give myself is, Darren, go and find the vocation that truly interests you. And I found I did. I remember back then thinking, this is good. I like this. This is interesting to me. I guess even hopefully excites me. And I think it did at the time. If I go back to the 90s, seems a long while away. And the advice is, find that and stick at it. I'd kind of couple that with something that's very, very real, is put a shift in, and regularly. It's the reality. You have to work at it, and there's no dodging that, I would say. And if there's anything else, I mean, that feels sort of like practical advice. I would say the extension of kind of getting me ready for a career, if I could talk to my younger self, is get a mentor to remind you that you're doing okay from time to time. I think that's fundamentally important, actually, as I look back, particularly now, as I look at the pressures that face, 20-somethings going into their career. I think that the value of that, and the ability just to pause in this crazy fast world that we live in and to say, am I doing okay? Give me a bit of feedback and give me the, maintain my confidence and focus of direction. So I think that's how I would describe it, really.
Especially if you have a manager that doesn't give you feedback, you definitely need a mentor, as someone to give you some guidance and just put a mirror in front of you, no?
Correct. The honest response. And you're right, Daniel, it doesn't need to be the guy you report to, or your boss. She might not be able to give you that feedback, but I think someone you can trust who just allows you to reflect, not so often, but just enough, to be able to say, I'm doing okay. And if you're doing okay, you can achieve anything.
Exactly. So Darren, I'm going to try and go back to our conversation and summarize it. So you mentioned at the beginning that, we've had a lot of turmoil in Europe, but we are in a kind of new normal where C-suites have now been able to normalize and plan in a more traditional way. And you're seeing more long-sighted conversations between retail partners and the industry, which is interesting. At the same time, we have a lot of tech coming into the industry, and that's like a lot of the conversation that we're having on this podcast as well. So companies have to deal with a big degree of ambiguity. Of course, we can't forget the Mars United Commerce, the new name, which is in line with the purpose of it, which is the growth of people, client, and community, and also the end-to-end perspective that you're giving, from data, commerce, activation, and to grow people, client, and community. What else did we have? So we had the issues for growth, as we were saying, geopolitical environment, and the issues with omni-channel execution, which basically mean really doing business in a different way, But all that is looking towards growth, which is still the key KPI. And I think especially we have a lot of conversation of investors are looking more for profitability than growth and so on. But let's talk, here we're in big FMCG, and growth is still king. If you see the results, when FMCGs go to the stock exchange and publish results and the growth is not there, we see what happens to this share, don't we? Even if they have some more profitability.
Right.
When we talk about digital capabilities, of course, we have digital commerce, super important, retail media, digital shelf, really turning up there and connecting with the consumer in the best possible way in every possible place. But that we can't really execute that well without having the data, those W's of what, when, where, and so on. Like if we don't have the right data in place, you like can't really get the other part right, and you need to use it effectively and cost effectively, which is also very important.
Yeah.
We talked about the need, and I think it's interesting that really like companies are like, okay, we need to change. So the way that consumers and shoppers act and react has become more dynamic. So companies need to be more dynamic. And I think that that's what the Mars United Commerce is helping a lot the clients with. And in the next 3 years, we dived in, well, we put a more emphasis on data, like according to Darren, the power of data will underpin everything. So really knowing the 5 W's will be super important, and operating in all the channels excellently, like whether it's physical store, retail media, other types of media is important, but you need to have that creative and emotional connectivity. So you need to have like with the consumer conversations that are not only transactional, but that are like really create a connection, an emotion. So Darren, I don't think we're gonna get bored in FMCG, are we? I think that the
Absolutely
podcast
not.
can go on and on.
For sure, it's a very exciting time. A brilliant summary, by the way, Daniel, and thank you. It's not. It's going to become more dynamic, more precarious in some ways, but never dull, and it's only going to be exciting over the next 5 years.
Excellent. We're looking forward for more. I think Mars United Commerce will probably be back in the podcast sooner rather than later. So look forward to the next conversation. Thanks, Darren, and thanks for our listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation, do leave us a review. It will take you 2 minutes, and it would really help us appear more and make more FMCG professionals like yourselves listen to us and learn from the experts that are brave enough and nice enough to come to the show. Have a great day.